But you have to go on the journey. Same way the milk dragon has to go on a journey.
In a nutshell, this story is about two kids that grow up in a very repressive society. A society where they think everything is perfect because they've banished anything that wasn't, or anything that was potentially hurtful or potentially controversial. So in this quote-unquote perfect environment, where everything is in balance, there's no crime, there's no illness, there's not really even death, although there is death, because when someone simply ceases to be and people forget that they ever existed. But you find out that what's happened is that the reason why the society is this way is that they have banished and tossed out into the river anything that could be harmful in the village. So what happens is these two kids follow this light source, which is actually the milk dragon, and enter the area outside the society. And there is everything that has been banished or forbidden or broken or cast away has washed up on the shore. And this is a fantastic place, this forest, which is filled with animals and is filled with art and music. But boy, it's far from a perfect environment also, because here there's a wolf and packs of wolves who have to depend on, survival of the fittest, etc.
Thou shalt not kill,
steal, covet, cheat, lie, envy.
One of the reasons that this play has gotten the reputation of being an impossible play is because there are a lot of different scenes. It's very cinematic. It switches from location to location very, very quickly. We have huge spectacle effects. We have a herd. At one point, we had a herd of elk. We have wolves. We have a word wizard's castle. We have Magda Yazalto's camp. We have all of these fantastic effects. One of the things that we found was that it wasn't a matter of having huge amounts of stagecraft, but it was a matter of finding the essential elements of each one of those settings. One of the things that helped us to get between those settings was a piece of stagecraft that we created in the class last spring. We designed the set with a ring revolve. So rather than the centerpiece revolving, we have a ring around the outside that revolves. What that allows us to do is to get between these locations very, very quickly. And so we can be in the village in one moment, and then 5 seconds later we can be inside a house, and the next minute we can be someplace else. And so that was one of the innovations that helped us to be able to get to all of those different locations.
Who goes there?
This play started out as probably one of the worst plays I'd ever written. And I wrote it when I was an undergraduate, and it just had all of the typical sort of things that you might think about in children's theater. And I put it away and said, no, I'm not going to touch it. But it had a germ of an idea about how people deal with fear and how people deal with fearful situations that they create within themselves, really.
Something that isn't real.
Over the next 50 years, she kept coming back to this piece. She had a lot of other plays in between, probably more than a dozen plays that she's explored and produced. And she decided to keep coming back to this particular story. She talks about working with the National Endowment for the Arts in the 1980s. And with the National Endowments for the Arts, there was a great deal of controversy about censorship. Rather than creating sort of a diatribe against censorship, what she wanted to do with this play was to explore the root causes for being afraid of art. Why would people try to get rid of those things that are complex, that are dangerous, that we don't want to discuss or explore?
As I was becoming kind of a spokesperson in favor of freedom of speech and a lack of censorship, etc., it suddenly occurred to me that a lot of the people that were so upset about all this were really dealing from a place of fear. And I thought to myself, someday there needs to be a play for young people and families about what happens in a society when they confuse fear with safety.
We are safe, we are whole, we are one.
The play got bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, and pretty soon it grew beyond where I thought it could actually be produced by a theater, so it became a novel. So I wrote it as a novel and developed it even further. A little while later, I went back and I said, no, this really at its heart is a play. But by that time, it had grown so large and grown so kind of complicated that I doubted whether most of the professional theaters that I knew were going to be able to have the means actually to produce it.
The play several times was attempted towards production. Susan had a number of different projects that she had going on, and as other projects came up, this one kind of got pushed to the back burner, and as Susan says, the dragon went back into its cave. As a new professor here, when I've been on the season selection committee, I was always told that we needed to be able to do named titles for our Theater for Young Audiences play and for our musical, because those were the two shows out of our season of 5 that had to really be able to sell tickets to be able to sustain the rest of the season. I thought after doing 3 named titles for the department, it was now my turn to ask to be able to do a non-title show. And I thought of all the shows that I would like to do, the show I would most like to do would be The Milk Dragon. I talked to Susan Zeter. I asked her if she would be interested in developing that play. She said she would be very interested in doing that. She was very interested in coming to Utah Valley University, not only because of the great innovation that we have here, but because we're a small university and a small theater. She wanted to make sure that this play could work and that we could prove that it could be mounted with a relatively small budget.
I wrote your name down right here in this book.
Really?
Look, it's always fun to play characters that are younger, definitely, because they have a lot of energy. She's not the youngest character I've played, so that was actually refreshing. She was a little bit older. But it's fun because I get to check into those feelings that I've already experienced, and so I know kind of where to navigate, whereas when playing older characters, sometimes I haven't had those experiences, so I'm not sure where to draw from.
We are not broken.
The first time I became attached to the Milk Dragon was just during fall auditions for the shows a previous season, and Dr. Newman had cast a reading of the play, and he was flying Susan and her husband Jim out to listen to this reading, and I wasn't really sure of exactly who Susan was or who Jim was or what the Milk Dragon was about until John sent us this script, and I started reading it, and I thought, this is bizarre, to say the least. And then during the readings, we started having a little bit of direction and kind of what was going on, and it helped a lot with the stage directions that Susan had written in, what we were supposed to be seeing, kind of feeling and hearing. And then a year later, that's when we were actually putting the show on for the season, and I was called back for ABRA. And I was really nervous because I'd already kind of become attached to this part over different things. And the previous semester, we actually had a class dedicated to the Milk Dragon. And that was fun, where we got to just explore what the characters felt, kind of different word plays of what these characters were seeing, how they were developed. It was definitely an adventure just getting cast alone, because our script went through at least 4 versions from the time I was cast to opening night. And even then, opening night, I had a line change that Susan had given us that day. And so just through that, it's been great to see how we can all collaborate and create something.
Nothing is safe here, not anymore. I've got to go warm my pack. Max is the son of the bag lady who also lives in the forest. She was banished from the village, and he's her son, but he was taken by wolves when they were banished to the forest, and he's had this dual kind of family thing where he back and forth between where he visits the bag lady, but he's really attached himself to the wolves, but he still comes back to her and still very much loves her. But I think he's kind of made himself a protector of all these people in the forest. At least he thinks of himself that way.
And you two look like extremely suspicious subjects to me.
Oh, wait a minute.
Oh, don't hurt me, I'm only a footnote.
There's a lot of characteristics that I have that are similar to Footnote. I used to be the kid that would sit in class and read the dictionary for fun. I would define words. I would pick a word of the day and share it with my friends, and it was always fun. I've worked on this character for the last 18 months. It's It's been crazy. When I started out, I didn't really have a background for the character. I didn't have many choices with it because we actually didn't get cast until about probably 5 months ago. So we didn't really do a whole lot of exploration, and we finally got into rehearsals, and working with Tyrell, who played the wizard, we made a lot of decisions as characters, and things changed. We started out being this kind of crazy circus characters, and it got pulled back into, we played it kind of as a medical drama for a while, and then we got to where we are now with it, and we played it as just, this is something serious that we are doing, that we need to save these words. And so we were able to find the balance between the comedy and the drama.
A joviality! Well, the J, the O, and the Y are all right, but the rest of the word is crushed beyond recognition!
Kind of developing the wizard with everyone else, the designers and the playwright. It was really interesting. It's something that I've never really had a chance to participate in. They actually brought the characters in for the design meetings, which was nice. And they kind of asked me specifically as the wizard, like, if since you're being the wizard, what would you be wearing? I told them a lot of tools I would have, and they just kind of smiled and said yes. They were obviously thinking along the same lines, and that's kind of where the tool belt came from. And then it was just, you brought in any pictures or any ideas you had about the character, and you were able to give them to the designers and saying, well, this is kind of how I think the wizard might progress during the play, or how we might look. And they were able to take that and kind of incorporate some of the ideas, which was really nice.
I remember in that very first reading, I was sketching. I was sketching out Max, his wolf boy costume, and Magda and her crazy fan arm and tusk leg. And even then, there was so much in the script that I was like, this is going to be a big, big challenge. And if we get this right, it is going to be a big success.
I'm so cold, I can't feel the tips of fingers first, then toes.
Arms and legs go numb, begin to burn.
The fear evolved during the special topics class too. This is something where everyone brought in an idea image or several idea images of what they felt fear represented and what fear would look like in physical manifestation form. So many people brought in all these different images, and we tried to discuss what fear is. We had two main ideas, and one was like slick and oil slick and just oozing over everything, and it just wasn't dirty or scary enough. It just wasn't edgy enough, frightening. So we went with garbage because it still has that oozing, trickling factor, but it clings to things, it attacks things, and it's so lingering. It just sticks to things, and it's gross. So that's where we went with fear, and that's how fear was developed. And then I took that and turned it into a physical costume piece.
Normally as a designer, you don't get a lot of feedback except for from the director. But we sat in a collaboration where everyone was allowed to or was invited to bring ideas for certain characters or for certain things, and then we would choose as a group which one we liked the most. So we had to present what we were thinking or what someone else was thinking, and then try and tie it in together to create something.
I know, I read all about wolves. They were banished ages ago.
We had these animal characters, and they're anything from wolves to hyenas to a heron to a turtles, there's a crab, there's a bunch of just animals. And we had the challenge of coming up with how these things are actually going to be portrayed as animals without making puppets. We wanted to lean away from the idea of puppets, and we wanted to have them all be made of found objects that were anything that was banned or broken or banished or censored or anything like unto that. So we picked all these different things that people just wouldn't use anymore, that wouldn't be in the world of the village, and we started creating and playing and coming up with all these different ideas of ways to create and do those things. And then once we kind of figured all of those things out and we set those, it was kind of cool to watch the cast and also to be able to be a part of that, because as a stage manager for shows, you shouldn't have any artistic say, but the director and the playwright were both asking me to have artistic say in it because I have such design experience. And so it was cool to be able to be part of that and to help make those things come to life. And then we had the dragon, and that initially started out as a very abstract dragon, and then it became more of a literal dragon, but it was very fascinating to watch as that whole thing progressed. Initially, our idea of the dragon was a simple strip of fabric. That's all it was just a strip of fabric that an actor was playing with. She was just playing on her own, doing her own little thing at one of our device sessions is what we called them, where we just had the actors take a bunch of materials and fabrics and things like that to try and create ideas of the dragon or how the dragon could be represented. She just started playing with this dragon, and she kind of created this character out of a piece of fabric. It was very fascinating, and I turned to the director when I saw her start to do this, and I said, hey, look at this person and just look at what she's doing. And she was cast as the milk dragon, and she started playing with all these things, and then she got to have a say in it, and kind of how she saw the dragon and what character or personality things that the dragon had. And it was very fascinating to watch as that dragon slowly progressed from being a mere piece of fabric to these giant wings. And I mean, we have a dragon head, and then we have different sized wings, and it starts out as something that's small and it's just a little baby dragon, but by the end of the play it's grown into this giant dragon.
Whatever you take from us, it cannot be enough!
You know, I really think that one of the hardest parts for professional theaters is really having the time and the resources to do the kind of in-depth work that we've been able to do here. And, you know, the average equity rehearsal period is about 2 weeks if you're lucky. You know, it's just so expensive. And so it becomes a matter of let's get it up and let's get it on, let's get it done as fast as possible. But to be able to live with a project, I mean, here for me at UVU for the last 2 years, I mean, each draft has informed the next draft and the next one and the next one. So I think the idea of going to a university and finding the level of commitment, I mean, to teach a class in this, it's much more than just a single production. It's really feeding a process that goes very deep. And I'm sure, at least I hope, that each one of these students that has been connected with it. And we've also have had a wonderful, Carla, a wonderful costume supervisor who's been, I mean, she was in the class and she's been as much of a part of this, of the excitement of this project. So the lines begin to blur a little bit between faculty and staff and students in a way that all of us are part of this great creative stew and make huge, huge contributions. So, and I think you can only do that kind of thing over time at like a university.
Alike or different? Different?
Alike or different?
Alike.
I came up with this idea, and I actually ended up being incorporated in the play, and it's kind of this moment that I have that I get excited for every single day, where we have a scene where our Zach, our character who plays Zach, he looks at two, initially it was balls, and they were just supposed to be different colors. One was gray, one was blue. And then each time, the blue one slowly faded more and more to gray until he eventually was holding two gray balls. And I asked Susan, I said, why are they balls? And I kind of questioned that idea. Like, you're adding an element into the play, and I'm curious as to why it's there. Because I actually I read the script wrong the first time I read it, and I thought they said apples, because this is a kid who runs around and he takes apples to other places. He delivers things. He's pretty much a glorified deliverer. And so one of the things that he runs around and gives people is he like takes apple buckets from point A to point B so they can get counted, so they can do all these things. And I read it and I thought they were supposed to be apples. And so I asked her, I said, what if they were apples as opposed to just random balls? Just because they established later in the play that the kids don't play, so it's like, why would you have a ball there? And so that was kind of a cool like moment that I had of working with the playwright and making deeper connections and also making the play make more sense within that world.
When you're actually starting out putting it into the theater, what is she doing for all that amount of time?
Susan Zeter worked with us almost directly during the class. She would Skype in occasionally and we'd share our ideas, and that was anywhere from acting choices to sound choices to costume choices, any kind of choices we were sharing with her on almost a weekly basis. And I think it's amazing to really get to participate with the playwright, because the playwright really is the one that thought of it in the first place. And instead of just taking a script and interpreting what you think it means, you get the opportunity to ask what they thought it meant and what they saw and how you can interpret that into reality. Because not every playwright and not every person really knows what they want, and it's really hard to describe when you get to interpret someone's inner thoughts and have them come to you and say, yes, this is exactly what I saw. I didn't know it, but that's exactly what I saw.
Working with Susan made me feel so valued because she listened to every comment, concern, inspiration I had as an actor, and when I kind of felt like maybe Abra feels this way, or I think this is why Abra says this line, and she validated that, definitely. She always took the input. Not everything was changed, obviously, to accommodate us, but she definitely made sure that the actors felt valued and that we were important, and that she never put us down, never told us no, or that we had a terrible idea, and she always listened, and that was the best experience I've ever had with a playwright.
The first week, Susan Zeter was there working with us in rehearsal, and we got it up on its feet completely in a week. And it was really, really rough, but it was cool that we could get the sound element in and some basic movements in and stuff, and that we could see the show start to work at that point, and it was just the first week of rehearsal.
It was just really nice to have Susan be able to communicate with me what her ideas would be, and I could take those and kind of throw them in with my ideas and what I thought about how the wizard would progress throughout the play and be able to incorporate those into my performance. And it's just a really unique experience to have the playwright be able to be there and kind of give you step-by-step improvements that you can run with, or just kind of hold your hand through the process, I guess.
When I was a girl in Slovenia, Slavos, my grandmother teach me the dances of rage for all of the people who starve in the cold and all of the children who die at young age.
We were able to block the play in about 3 weeks. And then started doing run-throughs, putting things together. Two people that were very instrumental in that process were John Thomas. John Thomas is a modern dance student here at Utah Valley University. He brought a whole set of expertise with movement. All of the movement that you see in the wolf scene and the battle between the wolves and the elk, creating the movement of the animals that we see on stage. All of those things came out of the explorations and the choreography of John Thomas. We also had Wendy Gorley. Wendy Gorley has played a number of roles for us here at Utah Valley University. She was a student who graduated in theater. as a valedictorian. And since she's graduated, we've employed her as the resident playwright for the Norda Theater. She's also served as the dramaturg for the project. She also is skilled in a technique called drum talk that she does with another storyteller, and that is a way of using vocalization and percussive elements. So she took some of the techniques of George Grant, this performance artist, and was able to incorporate that. So all of the sounds that are created in the show are created by the cast. There's no soundtrack, there's no amplification, there's no echo effects. Everything is created live by the actors on stage. And so Wendy Gorley was in charge of orchestrating all of that soundscape. We found a few weeks before we got into tech rehearsals that there were so many different cues that the actors had to do with the sound effects that we needed to free them up a little bit. And so we added a couple of actors. We added Michael and Zahara, and they are on the sides of the stage the whole time, creating a lot of the percussive elements, creating sound effects that frees up the actors so that as we deal with costumes and props and blocking, the actors can do what they need to do.
There actually was a point where I was not sure if we could pull it off. We had been working on it for 6 months, and we hadn't really made any solid decisions, and we kept rehashing ideas that had been brought up before and that we thought wouldn't work, and then we ended up going back to them. And so it was a little bit frustrating at times to have to, go back to those ideas, but everything kind of came together. So it's been cool.
I think Susan chose UVU to be the place that this Milk Dragon premiered, as we take challenges and we wholeheartedly look at things and we look at people square in the face and we will say, challenge accepted. We love incorporating designs and having those discussions and really getting into the nitty-gritty details of the worlds of the play, and we look at it with care and we are able to really just get a passion for it. And I think we have that passion and that willingness to say, okay, we have this new project and it's completely new and different and no one's ever done it before, and we want to do it. We want to be a part of it. We want to see what happens. We want to see where this dragon goes. We wanted it to happen. And I think that's one thing that the UVU Theater Department is very much about, is we want to take things and we want to create, and we get excited to create, and we get excited to be part of these projects, and we're just so excited all the time.
It's almost night, and someone needs to stay behind and put all this to right. Just look, the infinitives are split, the participles are dangling, compound sentences are torn asunder, and art thou afraid?
I'm really not sure where it's going to go next, and that's one of the things that's fascinating. I mean, one of the things that I've learned is that to keep its integrity, I can't make it smaller. I can't really, it's never going to be a play about 6 people and a coffee table, because those are the plays that often get produced fairly widely. So I will look for those places that are looking to take on an adventure and to try to find really innovative ways to solve some of the technical opportunities, really, of the script. I think it will live perhaps in universities, because again, looking for larger casts is always a good idea. It may find, I may take it back into a novel again, So at one point, one of the students did an absolutely superb final project on it and created a graphic novel around the Milk Dragon. And I think it'd make a fabulous graphic novel. And, when I saw the spareness of some of the drawings that this student had done, it was really fascinating to me. So my hope is that it will go on. My hope is that it will go on to professional production. I've had a lot of interest in it now that people know it is getting done from colleagues in the profession. This is a play, I hope, that's going to appeal to a variety of ages. I think it will hold younger viewers because of its magic, because of the dragon, because of the fantasy of it. I think it will hold older viewers and adults because of some of the deeper themes that run through it. I believe that a play should be like a banquet table, and people of all ages can come and take what they hunger for. So my hope is that everybody that comes to this play will take away a different meaning and take away a meaning that's very important to them.
To the place where everything is possible.